Hey, welcome. So this video is about how change happens in meditation and in therapy. What I've noticed is that I see these patterns of change emerging from all different traditions, different types of therapy, different types of meditations, and even through psychedelic experiences and other kind of big experiences, going traveling, for example, a lot of people come back feeling changed. And so I'm trying to get to the heart of what is actually happening when we change and why do we get stuck in the first place? What's the resistances to change? So the first factor, most important one, is awareness. There's a shift in awareness when change happens. And this is either we become aware of our patterns, we become aware of the way that we normally are, or we become aware of something new, something outside of our normal way of being. We're all stuck in habitual ways of being, habitual ways of thinking and feeling. And we don't even realize we're as stuck as we are. We may see ourselves as being stuck, but when we experience something outside of these habitual ways of being and feeling, then it's really obvious how stuck we are. We get up every day pretty much assuming that it's going to be like the day before. There's not really any real looking at what's really happening today. How am I really feeling? There's just an assumption that we are the way we are, that we feel the way we feel, that things are going to be the way that they've always been. But the reality is that we're always changing and we're always growing. There's always change happening. And it's very similar to the way a plant grows. That if you look at a plant on a day-to-day basis, it's going to look more or less the same. But then one day we'll see the plant flower, and the flower will start coming up slowly or gradually. We'll see it coming. But then one day it might just kind of open. And it may seem that that was really, okay, that's the day that the change happened, but really the change has been in effect the whole time. So really on a day-to-day basis, we're always changing. There's always growth happening, but it's often happening at such a slow level or kind of in more of a subconscious realm that we don't really see it happening in our consciousness. And people are often looking for these breakthrough experiences, for these big experiences that cause these shifts, and they do happen. But the reality is that they usually happen, or maybe always happen, as the result of a buildup, that there's actually this change happening unconsciously that we don't realize. And then one day there's this big shift, and it may seem like there's this clear cut before and after, but if we're really paying attention, we can usually notice the signs that are building. There's a certain ripeness. We're ready for change. I kind of think of this as the same way that earthquakes happen. I learned from a geologist once that tectonic plates, they're always moving, and they're moving in opposite directions. And what happens is they start building and building up this pressure because they're moving, but they're stuck together. But the pressure and pressure builds until there's like a slip. And then in that slip, that's when the earthquake happens. And it's the same with us, that we're always growing, but it's often this pressure that's building and building. And then sometimes there's this big slip where we just, have this breakthrough experience, this insight comes, and something changes, something we feel like, okay, now I need to change. And some, deep habit or deep way of being just suddenly shifts. We suddenly feel differently. And some people never really get the breakthroughs because there's not the pressure building. They're actually moving slowly. They're not getting stuck so much that the pressure is not able to build. And so there's this nice, slow, kind of gentle growth that's happening throughout their lives. But when we get stuck, then there's more of a possibility of a breakthrough happening at some point. And it's often the more kind of extreme experiences, either getting outside of our normal routine way of being, like it could be going on a trip, or could be on a meditation retreat, for example, which a lot of people have these breakthrough experiences. It might be something that needs to really push against the habitual ways of being to bring us outside of them. Then through that breakthrough experience, there's a new awareness. We are feeling or seeing something new. So we can get right to the heart of change by really working with awareness, by looking at how are we in our everyday lives? What are we experiencing? And to start looking for ways to see outside of that box. We first really want to notice patterns, like how we are. How are we thinking on a day-to-day basis? Are our thoughts normally focused on past experiences, or are we projecting future experiences, or are we worrying? Are we thinking fearful thoughts or hopeful thoughts? So it's just noticing the patterns, the feelings, and the kind of narratives or themes that underlie our thoughts. So the next big piece in change is actually paradoxical. It's acceptance. Often when we're trying to change, when we're trying to shift something, we just create more of this inner conflict, and it just keeps us stuck. It keeps everything just the way it is because of the tightness of it. So when we resist something, we tighten up around it, and that tightness keeps things stuck. And this is especially true for feelings. That if we're resisting feelings, if there's something we don't want to feel, we're trying to get away from the feeling, we're actually just keeping the feeling stuck in our system. And that the way to work through feelings is to start to feel safe to move into the feelings. And this is really unique to each person, to what will help them feel safe to feel what they've been previously avoiding. So if there are stuck feelings, if we're having trouble feeling in general, or if there's something that we feel we're avoiding or we're carrying tension with us, on some level we don't feel safe to feel. On some level we don't feel safe to really go into it. And this could have been because when we were very young, we didn't feel safe. It wasn't safe to go into the largeness of the feelings. And so we've developed this habit, this way of being, of avoiding the uncomfortable feelings instead of going into them. So if we want to work through feelings, we have to think, what will make us feel safe to go into the feelings? And this is the power of therapy, that with a therapist, the idea is that they make us feel safe enough to explore these things. And by exploring them, we're often talking about them. We're putting words to them. And as we express the feelings in words, we process them. They come up, we allow them through our system. Often people will be talking about feelings in therapy and they'll freeze up because they don't quite feel safe enough to experience it. And so in that case, it's the therapist's job to kind of regulate, to go in and say, hey, it's okay, we don't have to go into it, bring the person back to a feeling of safety, and then move slowly, talk around the feelings, talk about, the context, and just build more trust and safety before we can start to slowly and gently dip into the feeling and process what's there. A lot of our neuroses or our bad habits are actually trying to keep us safe. They're actually trying to actively avoid feeling something, or they're actively avoiding some fear. So we want to look at our patterns and think, how are these serving us? How are these helping us feel safe? What are they doing for us that could be interpreted in a positive way? And it's when we really acknowledge how our bad habits are serving us, how they're helping us be more safe and whatnot, that we can start to really go in deeper and look at what are the fears and what are the feelings underneath those. I'm going to give an example here. So let's say you're someone who's really angry all the time. Now, you might not like that you're angry all the time, so you're going to be partly resisting this anger and trying to not be angry. But the reality is that anger is usually a resistance. It's resisting some sadness or some grief. So let's say someone was mean to you and that made you angry. Of course, that's going to make a lot of people angry. But underneath that anger, there's hurt, right? There's pain that this person was mean to you. And so long as we entertain the anger and don't accept the hurtness underneath and don't feel the hurtness, we're not really going to process it. We're going to remain stuck in this anger. So what we want to do is we want to move beyond the anger. We want to look underneath at what feelings are here, what views or opinions or beliefs do we have about ourselves that we're maybe resisting, and what are the feelings of those? Do we maybe feel inadequate or hopeless? So we want to go into those feelings and really feel what's there and open to them. Do whatever we need to feel safe to open to those feelings, to process them. And this is scary because we think that if we open to these feelings, then we're going to remain stuck in them. That then I'll be there with them, and then there's really no escape. But it's actually the opposite, that by being with the feelings, by processing them, we actually move through them. We allow them to kind of move through our system, and we discharge them, and then we can come back to a place of more freedom and just feeling more okay. In meditation, this sometimes happens very organically, especially on meditation retreats, where we're really being with ourselves and we're being with our feelings and we're just sitting with it and being okay, practicing this non-judgmental, open, accepting attitude on whatever comes up. So it's really just accepting it layer by layer and getting in deeper and deeper to these more subtle layers of feeling and accepting them and allowing them to open and unravel. This doesn't always happen in meditation. Not everybody gets into this place of being able to process their feelings, and some people even use meditation as a way to avoid feelings. They say, oh, I don't like how I'm feeling, I'm going to focus on my breath or something else instead. So we want to make sure that if we're meditating, we're not using it as a way to avoid feeling. We're actually using it as a way to get grounded, to go internal, and to start to feel safe to feel feelings and to start to look deeper into what we're feeling. Meditation is like exposure therapy for life. The way that exposure therapy works is that something feels really uncomfortable, we really don't like the feeling, and so we normally avoid it. But then we come in and we say, okay, I'm going to feel this a little bit, and I'm just going to be with it. And then through the being with it, we realize, okay, I can actually stand this. I can be with it. I can, it's not maybe as scary as I thought it was, and the feeling is bearable. And through that ability to bear the feeling, it becomes more and more okay. It becomes more comfortable to be with, and a lot of the pain or the discomfort or the resistance around it dissipates. So this happens through meditation, but it also happens through therapy, exactly like I mentioned, exposure therapy, and just talking about things and realizing, oh, these things aren't maybe as horrible or scary or shameful as I think they are, that these things are actually okay. So a lot of therapy is around expressing these more vulnerable parts that we might have shame around, and having someone else listen and not reject us and not say, hey, you're bad for that, to say, hey, that's okay, you're human, we all feel this, we all experience this. And through that we lose a lot of the shame around it, and we start to just be more okay with not feeling great all the time, or with whatever feelings that we're holding on to. So if we're talking about real change here and real deep level change, it actually happens through a shift in identity. We have an unconscious view of ourselves, this unconscious identity, the way that we kind of know ourselves to be. And so long as we subconsciously, and I say subconscious for a reason, because it's really important to realize this is not in the conscious mind. It may also be in the conscious mind, but if we only work on this on a conscious level, we may never get to the real stuck parts, because the stuck parts are really in the subconscious mind. So we really want to examine what our subconscious view of ourselves is, how we just assume ourselves to be, and change only happens through the growth through that, and that usually happens on a slow process over time. If we perceive ourselves to be an angry person, or a hurt person, or like a victimized person, or whatever it is, then we're going to continue to behave this way. We're going to continue to act this way. So it's first noticing that that's the view we have of ourselves, and then accepting it and coming into openness and processing all the feelings that are tied to these views, and that will start to free us from it, and it will allow us to start to grow more naturally. What a lot of great therapists and psychologists say is that our psyche strives towards wholeness. It actually wants to be whole, and just as when we get cut and our skin knows how to heal itself, the same is true with our psyche. That if we can just remove the barriers to our growth, then the growth happens naturally. We don't have to really guide every step of our growth and say, this is the way I want to grow, and I'm going to create this new life and make sure that I mind all my habits and mind all my behaviors and thoughts to make sure I grow this way. It's actually just about removing the barriers to growth, removing the stuck points. And through that removing of them, the growth happens organically. And again, the removing of them happens through the opening to them and the acceptance of the underlying feelings. And this is acceptance on a really deep level. It is moving in layer by layer and just opening and allowing it all to unravel. This can take a long time, so patience or perspective is needed. Another metaphor I use for deep change is it's kind of like rebuilding a house, where if the house is all rickety, we can kind of try to fix certain parts of it, but sometimes we just need to level the house and rebuild the foundation and build like a really solid foundation for that house first. And to level the house means to just really deeply experience everything, to really go into our feelings over and over and process them and be with them. And that will help kind of move things, get things flowing. And then there's an opportunity to really start to work on the fundamentals. Who do we want to be in the world? What is really important to us? What values do we have that we want to pursue? And this is also why I'm really skeptical of any sort of hacks, like consciousness hacks, life hacks around growth, around real deep change, because this isn't something you want to hack. Like, you don't want to hack building a house. You want to really do it right. You want to get in there, you want to get dirty, and you want to make sure that you're really getting to the core of the foundation. And if there's, old kind of moldy, rotten beams down there, you want to get rid of them. You don't want to just kind of hack your way around them. So it's really about getting deep and really being honest and going deep into your feelings and allowing yourself to feel them, which is, again, a long journey. And you don't want to skip this. Like, 10 minutes of meditation is not going to change your life. It's not going to get to these really deeply buried parts. These are things that we actively have to move through. We have to have an intention of working through them if we really want deep and lasting change. So I like to do practices on these topics in these videos if it's appropriate. And this is a huge topic, so we can just kind of dive in and just try to get some perspective on it. I think that might be helpful. We're not going to try to create this deep and lasting change in one practice. Instead, we're just going to try to get some more perspective around how do we want to approach this. So if you're game for that, get comfortable. You can close your eyes if that's comfortable for you, or you can have your eyes kind of just half open, a soft lowered gaze. And just notice first what's happening in your body, what you're feeling. What I've been talking about may have brought up feelings, and that's not a bad thing. So the first thing we're doing is we're learning to open to our feelings. We don't want to be judgmental or stifling of our feelings. We want to welcome them and just allow ourselves to feel them as they are. So notice what you're feeling and where you're feeling it. And just practice. Can you be okay with that? Just, can you welcome that feeling? Just let it be as it is without trying to change it. And now I want you to imagine yourself from a distance. So you're watching yourself go through your life, and you're watching the patterns, and see if you can be a non-judgmental observer, that you're just watching this with curiosity. And just notice, how are you living your life? What patterns are you living on a day-to-day basis? How do you feel on a day-to-day basis? What feelings are present in you? What feelings are present right now? And what kind of thoughts do you have on a day-to-day basis? What kind of attitudes underlie those thoughts? And now ask, how is this serving you? How is this comforting for you or keeping you safe? These habits that you have, these ways of being, these ways of feeling or avoiding feelings, these ways of thinking, in some way they must serve you. They must be either comforting or affirming. So just look at how these patterns are serving you and what the fear is underneath. That if you stop being this way, if you dropped these patterns, what's the fear? What might happen? And again, coming back to the feelings, what are the underlying feelings? Can you feel them now, or can you get a sense of what they are in your life and what feelings you've been avoiding, what you don't want to feel? And then the question is, what would make you feel safe to feel these things, to go into these feelings? What would you need to feel safe and okay to start to feel what you're normally avoiding feeling? And then can you just summon this attitude of acceptance right now? Just notice what feelings have been coming up through this practice and just see if you can open and accept them as they are. Just being totally okay with our experience as it is, not trying to create a specific experience, but just accepting whatever experience we're having. And then just reflect on what you've learned through this, what's become more clear. Where you can create these safe spaces in your life to feel more. What the resistances or fears or judgments are around feeling. And what's motivating you? What's motivating you forward? What do you want out of life that's going to allow you to go into these places and feel these difficult feelings? And slowly open your eyes, going back. So hopefully that was okay. Hopefully it wasn't too intense. Yeah, this is a massive kind of topic we covered in a very short video, so don't be discouraged if it was overwhelming or if it was confusing in any way, but hopefully you got something out of it. I'm going to be doing more videos like this, kind of getting into more depths in these different parts of the process. So if you enjoyed this or you found it interesting, please subscribe to the channel and like the video, and thank you very much for tuning in and practicing with me.